That afternoon, I was grading papers in my small office overlooking a line of golden elms behind a frosted pane of glass. My university was small and quiet, its red brick paths repeating like a stanza belonging to memory. I held a red pen, marking through an essay on Emily Dickinson, and caught myself smiling at a clumsy but earnest line a student had written. The phone buzzed very softly, a polite vibration, as if it, too, knew that everything among these pages deserved respect. "This is Lieutenant Harrow, DNA Identification Division," a careful male voice said. "Professor Nora Whitfield, the national database has returned a match to the missing records of the Kingsley family. We need to verify the next steps with you." I heard the pen slip from my hand and strike the desk, a tiny sound, insignificant, yet splitting the room in half. A few scattered words drifted past, then silence. At 52, I thought I had outgrown every surprise life could throw at me. Exams, maternity leaves, last-minute substitute lectures, nights of sitting by a feverish child. Yet it turned out, a single phone call could still raise the past to its feet and force it to look me in the eye. I had long known I was adopted. My foster mother once told me they found me at a rural clinic, no papers, no name. She named me Nora because she loved how the /O:/ opened and closed like a light door. My childhood was steeped in the smell of apple pies and the whir of her sewing machine, in the rough palms of my father as he taught me how to sharpen knives in the kitchen. The blade must meet the stone at the right angle, not with force, but with steadiness and patience. We were poor in the sense of having no surplus, but never poor in affection. After they passed, the little house still carried the old wind chime on its porch, and every time I visited, it rang as if answering the door for them. "The Kingsley family of Boston," I repeated, trying to steady my voice. The name sounded like it belonged in a library. Oil portraits, velvet-bound wills, galas with engraved plaques. The lieutenant read me a file number and set an appointment with their legal representative. Everything neat. Procedural, like pulsing beneath it was a heartbeat that didn't belong to bureaucracy. I hung up and looked at the family photo tilted on my desk. Richard had snapped it one Sunday morning. Me, him, and the children standing before a gray stone church, sunlight striking Adrian's hair until it glowed like a cord. Adrian was 17 then, fresh from composing his first piece. Now he was Adrian Whitfield, a man of flights and backstages, thick with smoke and harsh lights. My twin daughters, Tamsin and Rhea, were different. They adored the smell of new paper, the ruled lines in notebooks, the sparring of theories, too fast for anyone else to follow. I often joked our house had one musician and two future scholars, while I was the one balancing all their coats on a single hook. I called Richard. He was in Chicago for a conference. After listening quietly, he asked, "Do you want me to fly back?" I shook my head, though he couldn't see it. "No, I'm fine. It's just strange. People spend their lives guarding a name, and here I am, given one far too late." He chuckled the chuckle of a man who knew that fine could be a coat I wore to cover something else. "Don't let them define you. I'll call Adrian. I bet he'll want to come home." "Don't," I said. "Let him finish his concert in Montreal. The girls will come with me." Tamsin and Rhea were in the library when I texted, "Come home early." Within 10 minutes, I heard running on the stairs. They burst in together, hair tangled, eyes bright. "What happened, Mom?" Tamsin panted, pulling out her earbuds. I told them. Rhea leaned on the chair, whistling softly. "Kingsley, Boston. Sounds like a 19th century novel." Tamsin tilted her head and laughed. "And we're the characters who show up halfway through. That evening, not that evening, as a tired anchor of words." But when the kitchen was warm enough, and only warm enough, we sat around the wooden table. I opened my notebook and wrote down questions. Why was I switched? Who knew? Where were the hospital files? What do they want now? Ria peeked over. You're writing like you're preparing a seminar. I shrugged. Anything can be a seminar if you ask enough questions. Tamsin poured tea. I have one simple question. Do you want to go? I looked at them, at the long, slender hands that had held mailboxes, books, and other people's hands when needed. I do, I said. Not to claim anything, just to see. To see the faces that gave me this face. The Kingsley's representatives sent a car. A black sedan waited at noon, quiet as a polite request. The driver addressed me as Mrs. Whitfield, and the girls as Miss Ria whispered. New England accent. Tamsin glanced at his ivory tie in the rearview mirror. Butler aesthetic, I laughed. Their detective game banter lightened the air. Boston opened before us with bridges and wide swaths of water. The sky was a soft gray, as if offering itself as backdrop to any story. I watched the city rise, red brick steeples, parks, stone steps where high heels made their own sound. The driver turned into an old quarter, wrought iron fences, ancient elms arching overhead. The Kingsley estate appeared beyond a curve not gaudy, but like an old man with a fine coat and a long memory. The gates opened. We stepped out. A man was waiting, not guard, not receptionist, but something in between. I am Avery, personal secretary to Mr. and Mrs. Kingsley. He bowed slightly, his gaze brushing past me as if acknowledging something only he knew. This way, please. Not through the main hall of chandeliers and portraits, but down a narrow corridor with light filtering through frosted glass. The smell of polished wood mingled with dried lily-of-the-valley sachets. Closed doors lined the hall like paragraphs unwilling to be read. We hadn't reached the end when voices carried toward us. A younger man's, urgent, commanding. I told you, this shouldn't be dragged out. The press won't let it go. A woman's, overly casual. Don't worry. They just need a pretty story. A long-lost sister comes home, a family dinner. Done. The twins exchanged a silent glance. Avery coughed politely, just as a figure turned the corner. Dark blue suit, gray striped tie, the exact face you'd expect on a business magazine cover. He stopped half a beat, enough for his eyes to register us, enough for me to see surprise flare, and then snuff out like a struck match. Daniel Kingsley, he introduced, voice low, perfectly courteous. Sister Nora. His eyes lowered briefly, as if measuring the degree of kinship. Please, this way. Father and Mother are in the East Garden Room. I nodded. Ria moved closer. Tamsin slipped her hands out of her pockets. We followed behind Avery and Daniel. The wall to our right was lined with black and white frames. Graduations, trophies, winter hunts. At the final door, light spilled from a glass atrium. Velvet gray chairs, a silver teapot, and two white heads bent in quiet conversation. As if listening to a weather forecast, Avery opened the door. Cold air slipped through the cracks, scented with dead leaves. The two elders turned at once. Every theory about heredity dissolved. I saw myself in her cheekbones, in his tilted gaze. Before any greeting, before any title, a sigh escaped no one knew from whom, like an old joint sliding back into place. Daughter, she said. No tremor, no drama. Just one word, laid gently on the table like a spoon. I did not cry. Tears did not come. Instead, something shifted outward from my spine, like a train easing into station. Something stopping exactly where it must. TAMC squeezed my hand. Ria took a deep breath, eyes drifting toward the ferns. I smiled just enough to unclench my wrist. My name is Nora, I said, not your daughter. I let the introduction stand alone. Brief, like the first line of a chapter yet to be written. We sat. The silver teapot poured a light amber brew, neither strong nor weak. The man my father set his cup down, his freckled hand steady. He spoke of hospital records unearthed, of discrepancies, of how we will handle this delicately, as if delicacy were statute. I listened in silence. Daniel remained standing, his glance drifting over us like a sentry at a bridge. The girls sat upright, saying nothing. But I could see the way their lips tightened. They were taking notes inside their heads. When the pot was half empty, I placed my cup down. "I am a professor of literature," I said. "I have a husband, 3 children. I came to meet you, to know you. I did not come to play a role." She regarded me for a long time, then nodded once, slowly. He twisted his ring, as if the agenda of a meeting had just changed. Outside, a final autumn leaf slid down onto the stone terrace and lay still. No one picked it up. We were all too busy searching for the right names to call each other. And I understood from this very first meeting that this reunion would have no straight road. But like any good text, it would carry its silences worthy of respect. I leaned back, exhaled, and accepted that I had stepped into a chapter no one else could write for me. And my daughters sat flanking me, steady as 2 parentheses holding a long sentence. The glass house behind the east garden was only a small wing of the vast Kingsley estate. After our first meeting, we were invited to walk through a long corridor that led to the main residence. Every detail spoke in unison, a language of power: hand-woven Persian carpets, gilded mirrors etched with floral designs, paintings of ships that must once have belonged to collections catalogued in the press. Each step echoed on the polished wooden floors, not in welcome, but as a reminder. We were guests. Rhea tilted her head and whispered to Tamsin, if this house had a key signature, it would be in a major chord, everything bright, authoritative, refusing any dissonance. I heard her, smiled, and knew my daughters were once again transforming suffocation into an intellectual game. Their scholarly mischief was the shield that kept us from being swallowed whole by all this grandeur. Daniel walked ahead, tall and straight, like a column belonging to the house itself. I could sense the tension in his shoulders, as though guiding me was a burden rather than a courtesy. As we turned into a larger hallway, he suddenly stopped to take a call. His voice dropped low, but the high-arched ceiling carried his words clearly to me. "No, we're not dragging this out any longer. The press is already asking questions. To quiet things down, we'll host one simple dinner, take a few photographs. After that, she can return to her own life. This family doesn't need more complications." I saw Rhea blink, her face turning cold. Tamsin pressed her lips tight, as if afraid she might blurt something too direct. I touched my daughter's arm gently, signaling restraint. Inside, each word Daniel spoke dropped like stones, rippling into the truth. To them, I was not part of the family, merely a variable to be managed neatly. When Daniel ended the call, his eyes briefly met mine. No apology in them, no placating smile. He simply moved on, as if I hadn't heard a thing. We reached the grand hall, where Celeste, the woman who had lived the life that might have been mine, stood waiting. She wore a blush-pink dress, pearls glowing at her throat beneath the chandelier's light. She turned, her eyes radiant, her smile perfect but stiff at the edges. "Sister Nora, at last," she said, leaning on the word sister with a tone that wavered between respect and mockery. I inclined my head, studying her face. From a distance, Celeste did resemble me in certain angles, the long eyes, the pointed chin. But likeness of appearance was not shared history. I thought of my adoptive mother, her calloused hand steadying a whetstone. That root could never be misplaced. Violet, Celeste's daughter, was also there, 18 years old. Bright brown eyes, self-assured bearing. Instead of shyness, she stared straight at me, then flicked her gaze toward my daughters. For a fleeting instant, I caught the spark of comparison. Understandable, my girls, in their early 20s, carried the maturity and natural confidence of those who had weathered trials. Violet, raised in velvet halls, seemed unaccustomed to sharing the world's attention. Celeste stepped forward, clasping my hand lightly, her touch cold. "My family has waited for this moment for so long," she said. Yet Daniel's eyes, just behind her, told a different story, I see. As if to warn me, my presence was far from welcome. A woman's voice rang out behind us. We should move to the dining room. It was Mrs. Kingsley, my biological mother, whom I had met that morning in the East Garden. Now she wore a deep, violet velvet coat, her stride commanding. The private reunion was over. The social performance was about to begin. The dining hall unfolded with a long table draped in white linen, crystal glasses arranged in perfect symmetry, tall candles burning. It looked prepared more for a ceremony than a meal. I heard Rhea murmur to Tamsin, like a concert where the musicians don't have their own score. As we sat, the conversation was guided with practiced ease questions about my work, about my family life. But beneath their inquiries ran another note: comparison, judgment. A distant cousin at my right exclaimed, "A professor of literature? How curious. I assumed you would be in finance, perhaps? After all, teaching can't pay much, can it?" I smiled. "You're right, Tit doesn't pay much. But it pays in lives changed by words." My answer made him pause. Across the table, Celeste gave a polite smile, while Daniel lowered his gaze as though bored. That atmosphere made one truth starkly clear. They had not brought me back to welcome me. They were staging a show, and my children and I had been cast as supporting characters in a play already scripted. The meal ended with a courtesy so polished it was cold. As we rose, Mrs. Kingsley placed a hand on my shoulder. "Tomorrow, Nora, we will discuss further. Tonight, rest." Her voice was warm, but in her eyes was something closer to negotiation than joy. On the veranda, Rhea took my hand and whispered, "Do you see? All they need is a pretty family picture to hang on the wall." Tamsin nodded, staring at the stone columns. "But we are not decorations." I inhaled deeply, the cold air filling my lungs. The Kingsley estate loomed majestic in the night. But within me, a resolve had already been lit. Neither I nor my daughters would be props in anyone's theater. This was only the beginning. The next morning, Boston sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of the guest room assigned to us. It wasn't a hotel, but a side wing of the Kingsley estate, resembling quarters meant for foreign visitors. Pale beige walls, a fireplace long extinguished, and landscape paintings hung too high gave the room an air both elegant and remote. Tamsin and Rhea sat by the window with notebooks open, exchanging occasional remarks as though they were filling in the blanks of an unfinished novel. A knock came at the door. It opened to reveal Celeste stepping in with Violet. They looked as if they had walked out of a fashion magazine, clothes tailored to perfection. Jewelry understated yet catching the morning light. Celeste smiled softly, but her gaze skimmed across the room before settling on me as though weighing every detail. "Did you sleep well?" Celeste asked, her voice smooth as velvet laid on a staircase. "I slept," I replied. Keeping my tone even, Violet interjected, curiosity too sharp to hide. "So you really teach at that little college? Where is it, Massachusetts?" "Yes," I nodded. "A modest school, but my students are devoted. It has been my home for over 30 years. Violet arched her brows, as if weighing the grand halls where she attended galas against a small campus tucked among trees. I caught Tamsin's faint smirk, while Rhea bent over her notebook, jotting something down. Celeste led us to the tea room, where Mr. and Mrs. Kingsley were already seated. Their eyes held both longing and hesitation. Mrs. Kingsley touched my hand, holding it a moment longer than necessary. "Nora, I know there is distance between us, but time will bridge it." I didn't pull away, but I didn't answer either. The question resounded inside me. Was this distance fate, or the product of decades of deliberate silence? At the tea table, Daniel was already present, his morning suit immaculate. He flipped a newspaper idly, though his glances never strayed far from me. "We should be clear," he said, calm but cutting. "The family has decided to present Nora as a goddaughter. It's the least disruptive arrangement. The public enjoys fairy tales, but even fairy tales require control." Tamsin straightened, her eyes sharp as a blade. "And what about the truth?" Daniel frowned slightly. "Truth has many shapes, young lady." I set my teacup down, the soft clink punctuating my words. I did not come here to contest a title. But neither did I come to be written into a role of someone else's story. Who I am, what my life has been, is proven by the long journey I've lived. I need no additional label. The air sank heavy. Mrs. Kingsley sighed faintly, while Mr. Kingsley twisted the ring on his finger, avoiding my eyes. I knew they wanted to make amends somehow, but feared that full disclosure would crack the family's polished veneer. Celeste stayed quiet for a while, before saying softly, "I understand. But Nora, you must also understand this house has its own rules. The Kingsleys cannot let it be known that for decades they raised the wrong daughter." Her tone was gentle, yet each word fell like a drop of cold water. Violet shrugged, glancing at my daughters. "At least you grew up in a home filled with love. Here, everything has a price." Her words startled me. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, not arrogance, but weariness. For the first time, I saw Celeste look at her daughter. Her expression wavered briefly before her smile snapped back into place. The conversation ended soon after. As we left the tea room, Daniel paused me with a lowered voice. "You may not believe it, but your presence makes everything difficult. Think of our parents. Don't add to their burdens." I looked him straight in the eye. "Brother, some distances were never mine to create. If you truly want to protect them, then don't let lies keep growing." His lips tightened. But he said nothing. On the way back to our quarters, Rio walked beside me, whispering, "Mom, this distance will never disappear. But at least we've named it." I nodded, knowing this journey had only begun. Distance was not only in blood or power, was in how each person chose to face the truth. And my daughters and I had chosen to face it. That afternoon, we were ushered into another sitting room. Larger this time, its glass doors opening onto a rose garden waning at season's end. Ivory lace curtains hung long, sunlight breaking into fractured streaks across the thick wool carpet. The stillness felt deliberate, as though someone had staged the space to make the conversation less of a family gathering and more of a ritual. Mr. and Mrs. Kingsley sat opposite us, Daniel and Celeste between them. Violet lingered to the side, arms loosely crossed, her expression distracted but her eyes sharp, tracking every reaction. My daughters and I sat upright, not quite as guests, yet nowhere near recognized as kin. Mrs. Kingsley began, her voice trembling but calculated. "Nora, your father and I have thought carefully. We cannot turn back time, but we can do what is right now. We want to accept you, but in our own way. The public will know you as a goddaughter of the family. That is safer. In return, we will arrange for you to have a better life. An apartment in Beacon Hill. Financial security enough so you and your children never need to worry again. Think of it as restitution." I listened, each word sinking like stones into a well. An apartment, a sum of money. To them, a life stolen, decades raised outside the family. Could be measured and balanced against real estate and a bank account. Daniel followed, his gaze unflinching. "You must see this is the best arrangement for everyone. We preserve our dignity. You and your family are assured a future. You have lived more than half your life without the Kingsley name. You hardly need the noise of it now." Tamsin shot to her feet, her voice clear and hard. "Excuse me, but my mother is not an antique to be appraised. An apartment in Beacon Hill, a sum of money, none of that can buy back stolen memories." and it certainly cannot purchase dignity. Rhea set her pen down, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. What you've offered is not right. It is only a way to keep up appearances. A transaction, nothing more. Celeste frowned, straining to keep composed. You're young. You don't yet understand the pressures of a great family. Every decision has its reasons. I met Mrs. Kingsley's eyes. Steady. I know you have reasons. But truth remains truth. I don't want money. I don't want an apartment. I already have a family. And I will not raise my children to believe dignity can be traded for conditions on paper. Silence fell heavy. I saw Mr. Kingsley's hand tremble as he gripped his cane, but he said nothing. His gaze wandered like that of a man who had lived his life within the boundaries of honor. Powerless now, as those walls cracked, Daniel cleared his throat, but before he could speak, Violet surprised everyone. Maybe she's right. Every eye turned to her. She lowered her head slightly, but her voice was firm. If all we ever care about is the facade, then everything inside rots. I've seen enough of it. Celeste spun toward her daughter, eyes flashing with warning. But Violet had already spoken, and her words punctured the script like a needle through silk. I rose to my feet. If you truly wish to see me, then see me as I am. But if all you want is a palatable image for the press, then forgive me. I will not play a role. Rhea and Tamsin rose with me, steady as two pillars at my side. No one stopped us. Only the curtains stirred softly in the draft, and silence pressed thick around a family that had just failed at its scheme. As the door closed behind us, I heard Tamsin exhale sharply. Mom, they don't want a daughter. They want an ornament. I squeezed her hand lightly. Then let's never allow ourselves to become ornaments. In the corridor, light poured down from the glass dome, so bright it seemed to tear through the shadows we had just walked out of. I moved slowly, knowing this much with certainty. The Kingsleys' power game had only just begun, and we would not allow ourselves to be easy pawns. That evening, we were once again invited down to the grand dining hall. I had anticipated this, a meal not meant for nourishment, but for performance. From the moment we stepped through the carved oak doors, I saw the chandelier blazing brighter than usual, the table draped in immaculate white linen, crystal glasses lined in precision like an orchestra waiting for its cue. Servants in black vests moved silently, placing each dish with excessive reverence. At the center sat Mr. and Mrs. Kingsley, Daniel on one side, Celeste and Violet on the other. Tamsin, Rhea, and I were placed directly across, positioned like honored guests, but also displayed as exhibits. Around the table, a scattering of distant relatives cast looks that were part curiosity, part scrutiny, half pity, half disdain. The first course was served, but no one truly ate. Words were the main dish. An aunt, her tone overly sweet, leaned forward. Nora, you must have been so surprised to discover your background. Out there you teach at some small provincial college, don't you? The student body must be rather tiny. I set my fork down and smiled. Small, yes, but small enough that I can remember every face by name. To me, that is a blessing, Daniel cut in, his gaze sliding toward my daughters. But surely the girls would want more opportunities. In a family like the Kingsleys, they could achieve much greater things, couldn't they? Tamsin laughed softly, her voice steady. We already have research fellowships in Europe. I'm not sure what more could be offered, here unless by greater you only mean power and money. An awkward silence fell. Beside her, Rhea added calmly, for us, knowledge is the real power. I noticed Violet blink, her eyes flashing with something defiance, perhaps, or envy. Celeste lifted her glass of wine, smiling smoothly. Such youthful confidence. But you'll come to understand the world isn't governed by knowledge alone. Here, every decision is bound to responsibility and tradition. I replied evenly. Tradition has its value. But tradition cannot conceal the truth. Mrs. Kingsley touched her husband's hand gently, as if to cool the rising air. Yet the probing continued from relatives who couldn't resist their curiosity. Your son Adrian, isn't it? I hear he plays music. An interesting profession, but not a very stable one, is it? I smiled, pride blooming quietly within me. Yes, Adrian is a musician, and his music has already carried his name abroad. I believe the only stability a person truly needs is faith in oneself. Some shrugged, others changed the subject. But their intent was clear: to mock, to diminish, to make us feel small against the grandeur of this hall. Yet each barb was blunted, turned back by the composure and confidence of my children. Midway through the meal, Violet suddenly spoke, her tone half jesting. Half-nist, at least you sisters have each other. Here, I sometimes feel very alone. Celeste immediately placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, forcing a brittle smile. Violet just has a habit of saying whimsical things, but I had seen the flash of something real in Violet's eyes. A hollow no amount of gold could fill. When dessert arrived, I knew the dinner had served its purpose, not to connect, but to test. They wanted to see us falter, to measure whether I was worthy of reclaiming a seat that once should have been mine. What they hadn't expected was that their mockery only sharpened Tamsin and Ria's resolve, made them clearer in who they were. As we rose from the table, Ria leaned close to whisper, "Mom, they think family can be defined by a long table and crystal glasses. But for us, family never needs to be proven here." I squeezed her hand, glancing up at the ceiling heavy with chandeliers. Never had their light felt so cold. And yet, in my heart, warmth stirred, kindled by pride in my children. I knew tonight was only a prelude. The facade would soon begin to crack, and the truth along with the secrets they guarded could not remain hidden forever. That evening, the Kingsleys hosted a gala to celebrate the so-called family reunion. More truthfully, it resembled a social exhibition where glittering gowns and perfectly fitted tuxedos gleamed under chandeliers, and smiles were frozen in place like mannequins displayed behind glass. Tamsin, Ria, and I were escorted into the grand hall through the entrance reserved for honored guests, though it was clear we were not considered true guests at all. Dozens of eyes turned toward us as we entered, curious, appraising, some already judging. I immediately sensed the murmurs ripple across the hall. The whispers made no attempt at subtlety. So that's the long-lost sister? She looks ordinary enough. Nothing remarkable. But I heard her children are quite accomplished. Accomplished or not, it doesn't erase her background. I heard it all, yet allowed no expression to surface. I merely tightened my grip on my daughter's hand beside me, reminding myself I had endured far harder years than this, and I had no need of their validation. Celeste appeared to greet us, her face soft but her eyes laced with control. She smiled at the guests, then turned to me, her voice sweet yet edged. "How fortunate you could arrive on time. Nora, a family is only complete when everyone is together." The words, "a real family," pricked like needles, but I simply nodded. Calm, yes. A real family has no need to prove itself. Several guests twitched at the corner of their lips. Celeste blinked but maintained her smile. Music swelled, and guests drifted into pockets of conversation. Tamsin, Ria, and I stayed near the drinks table, quiet, careful. But then Violet, Celeste's daughter, approached, her voice low but sharp as a blade. "I don't understand why they brought you back. You already had your life out there. We don't need strangers here." Tamsin shot back, eyes steady. "Strangers aren't defined by blood. Strangers are made when people push each other away," Ria added, her tone soft but firm. "If you feel we're strangers, that's your choice, not the truth." Violet flushed, ready to retort when a group of her friends arrived. One boy smirked openly. "Oh, so this is the new aunt. Doesn't really match the Kingsley standard. At least her daughters are pretty guests that'll draw some attention." Laughter rippled, blatant and cruel. Before I could respond, Rhea smiled coolly. "Thank you for confirming we stand out more than expected. Admitting others surpass you isn't easy, is it?" The air froze. Several older guests exchanged glances, clearly displeased not with us, but with the insolence of the true Kingsley youth at that moment. Mr. Kingsley tapped his glass, raising his voice in a formal toast. He spoke at length about family bonds, tradition, and one home under one roof. Yet I noticed his hand trembled slightly when he said reunion, as though even he could not believe the words himself. And then, the rupture as wine was poured. A guest's phone lit up its screen, flashing breaking news from an online outlet. The Kingsley family and the child swap rumor, a truth long buried. Whispers erupted, surging through the hall like an undertow. Eyes swung toward me. A few discreetly raised their phones to snap photos. The gala, staged to display perfection, had instantly transformed into a battlefield of speculation. Celeste rushed forward, her voice pitched high to drown the noise. "Please, do not believe such tabloid nonsense. Our family has always been transparent and strong." But the more she denied, the sharper the suspicion grew in the eyes around us. I stood still, saying nothing, allowing the truth to seep naturally through the cracks of their carefully painted facade. Tamsin leaned toward me, whispering, "Mom, they're rattled." I gave the slightest nod. Yes, the mask was beginning to crack, and this was only the beginning. After the gala, its echoes rippled through the city. The online article was not removed, on the contrary. It multiplied into analysis and commentaries, dissecting everything from the Kingsleys' posture and gazes to the exact words used in their speeches. The frenzy only deepened. The next morning, my daughters and I were summoned to the Kingsleys' private study. Gone were the chandeliers and hundreds of watchful eyes, only a broad room scented of old oak. Curtains drawn tight to shield us from outside scrutiny. Mr. Kingsley sat behind a heavy desk, his hands interlaced. Mrs. Kingsley stood by the window, more tense than usual. Daniel was there too, his face hard but his eyes betraying unease. Celeste folded her arms while Violet deliberately sat apart, her eyes glittering with curiosity more than concern. "We need to settle this matter," Mr. Kingsley began, his voice low and heavy as lead. "The news is out. We can no longer pretend." I remained silent, letting them speak. Mrs. Kingsley turned, her gaze meeting mine, and sighed. "Nora, from the very day you were born, there was a mistake. No an exchange, done deliberately." Celeste's brows lifted in feigned shock, though her clenched hands betrayed her. Daniel's voice snapped sharp. "Mother, I thought we agreed never to speak of this again." Mrs. Kingsley shook her head, eyes glistening. "It can't be hidden now. The story has broken. At the very least, our true daughter deserves the truth." I sat straighter, calm. "Please, say it. Don't circle around it." Her voice quavered. "At that time, I had a close friend, Eleanor. She lost everything, her fortune, her husband, and was left to raise her child alone. In her desperation, she exchanged her daughter for mine. You were the child taken away, abandoned in an orphanage. And Celeste, her daughter, was raised here as a princess of our household." The room froze solid. Celeste sprang to her feet, her voice shrill. "No. Don't believe this slander. I've always been your real daughter." Daniel's face flushed red. "Even if it's true, it's been 54 years. What use is your return now? Do you realize you're destroying this family's reputation?" I looked him squarely in the eye, answering evenly. "Reputation is not destroyed by truth. It is destroyed by lies that have been allowed to grow too long. Violet sat still, her eyes wide. Perhaps for the first time in her life, she saw her mother no longer as flawless marble, but as something cracked. Mrs. Kingsley moved toward me, her trembling hands closing around mine. "Nora, I am sorry. I trusted wrongly, raised wrongly. But you are still our blood. You are my daughter." Celeste wept, but her tears did not move me. They fell like cracked stage paint, revealing panic rather than love. Tamsin leaned close to whisper, "Mom, at least the truth has finally been spoken." Ria's eyes swept the room, fierce, but I see no remorse. Only people forced into admitting what they can no longer deny. Double quotes, yes. My daughters were right. The Kingsleys had never wanted the truth to surface, but now it had surged into a wave unstoppable. And when a wave crashes, the fragile and the false are the first to fall. I rose, my voice steady and clear. I did not come here for titles or wealth. I came only for the truth. And today, you have admitted it. That is enough. No one could answer. I took my daughter's hands and walked out, leaving behind faces pale and trembling. As the door closed, I knew one thing. A 50-year performance had ended. But its aftershocks had only just begun. The news spread like fire meeting wind. In a single night, the Kingsley name blanketed every front page from established newspapers to countless blogs and forums. The child swap story became the hottest topic among the elite. Dramatic enough, scandalous enough, impossible to look away from. On social media, photos of me and my daughters at the gala were instantly circulated. People compared my face with Mrs. Kingsley's, marveling at the undeniable resemblance. Captions bristled with irony. "The real daughter, abandoned 54 years ago, returns at last to glittering luxury." Some showed compassion. How horrifying for a mother to let her child be exchanged. What kind of life did that woman endure for all those decades? Others spat bitterness. She already has a family, successful children. What more is she here to demand? This isn't Lovett's opportunism, but not a few praised my daughters. Clips of Tamsin and Ria sitting upright, answering sharply at the gala table, were cut and shared thousands of times. The most liked comment read, "Truly daughters raised with strength." Kingsley blood or not, that poise is undeniable. That morning, as I stepped out of the hotel where we were staying, the entrance was packed with reporters. Camera flashes blinded, questions crashed over us like waves. "Mrs. Nora, do you intend to file a lawsuit to claim inheritance rights? How do you view Celeste, the woman who lived the life that should have been yours? Does your son, Adrian, know about this? Has he made any statement?" I stayed calm, my voice clear but brief. I have no comment except this: truth cannot be buried forever. Tamsin tugged my sleeve, whispering, "Mom, don't let them twist your words." I nodded, then held both daughters' hands, guiding them through the press of microphones into the waiting car. For a moment, memory tugged me back to my youth, to the days when I endured scornful stares because of my uncertain origins. Today, history repeated itself, but this time, I was not alone. That evening, I received an unexpected call from a major newspaper. The reporter's voice was earnest. "Mrs. Nora, readers want to hear directly from you. Not rumors, not denials, just the truth." I hesitated. A part of me longed to refuse, unwilling to drag my children further into media storms. But then Tamsin laid a hand on my shoulder and Ria looked me in the eye. "Mom, if you don't speak, others will write the story for you. And they'll write it to serve the Kingsleys." My daughters were right. I had to speak the next day the interview was published. I recounted my childhood, the foster parents who had raised me, the truth that had just surfaced. I made no accusations. I simply said that what hurt most was not material loss, but the fact that the truth had been hidden for more than half a century. The article spread rapidly. People argued, debated, but for the first time. The story was told in my voice, not filtered through the Kingsleys, nor twisted by tabloid pens. Meanwhile, inside the Kingsley estate, disorder reigned. I heard Celeste had locked herself in her room, refusing visitors. Violet, shunned at school, came home each day with red-rimmed eyes. Daniel went public, attempting to deny this is nothing more than a misunderstanding. Nora is family, but Celeste is still my sister. The Kingsleys are not divided, but the more he spoke, the stronger suspicion grew. Legal experts, sociologists, even former Kingsley staff began to step forward, recalling ambiguous signs they had witnessed in years past. One evening, as my daughters and I sat by the hotel window, the sunset painted the sky a deep crimson. Rhea whispered, "Mom, I don't think the truth ends here." "More will come out," Tamsin nodded. "Exactly. What they fear most isn't Hewitt's losing their perfect facade. And once the mask is cracked, it always shatters." I said nothing, but inside I knew. The real storm was only beginning. And this time, I would not retreat. A month after the interview, the Kingsley name had yet to leave the front pages. Debates raged endlessly from corporate boardrooms to small cafes. People split into factions. Some sympathized with me, the abandoned daughter. Others defended Celeste, the woman who had lived an entire life under the title of Kingsley's daughter. Then the invitation arrived. The annual charity ball hosted by the Kingsleys. This time, my name was on the guest list. I knew it was no mere courtesy. It was a test of performance the world would watch to see which daughter of the family would choose to stand beside them in public. That night, the hall blazed with light. Ball gowns, crystal tiaras, masks that half revealed, half concealed. I wore a simple black dress, no sequins. No sweeping train, only a quiet silhouette shaped by more than half a century of endurance. Tamsin and Rhea walked beside me, their youthful presence a sharp contrast to the deliberately ostentatious heiresses swirling around us. As we entered the ballroom, whispers rippled clearly to my ears. "That's her, the lost sister. She looks proud, doesn't she? Let's see if the Kingsleys dare let her sit with them on the dais." Mr. and Mrs. Kingsley were already seated, Daniel beside them, his face heavy. Celeste and Violet made their entrance last, their silver gowns glittering as if to underline their claim as the family's jewels. Applause rose but unevenly. Part of the hall hesitated, another part held its breath. Waiting for the drama to ignite, after the introductions, the MC announced grandly, "Tonight, the Kingsley family is honored to welcome their long-lost daughter, Mrs. Nora." A spotlight struck me. Applause filled the hall, yet beneath it ran murmurs, shifting chairs, and probing stares. I walked forward, each step steady. No bowing, no avoidance. Mr. Kingsley extended his hand, inviting me to stand beside him. Mrs. Kingsley gave a small nod, eyes glistening. But across from them, Celeste clutched Violet's arm, her lips trembling, her eyes blazing with fury. At that precise moment, a voice rang out from the crowd. A journalist, unafraid to shatter the polished atmosphere. "May I ask, within this family, who is the true daughter? And who has lived over 50 years under a borrowed name?" The ballroom froze. Celeste turned pale. Daniel leaped to his feet, shouting, "Absurd question. We will not answer such slander." But the reporter raised a file high, his voice cutting through the silence. "We have evidence. Old birth records and testimony from a nurse who worked at the hospital that year. One of the infants was switched in the maternity ward." The hall exploded. Guests buzzed, cameras flashed relentlessly. I stood still, not surprised. only sensing that the truth no longer belonged to us alone. It had become public property. Celeste shook, stepping into the spotlight. No. I am the Kingsley's daughter. I have lived. I have contributed. No one can strip that from me. But Violet clutched her mother's arm, her voice breaking. Mother, if it's true. We can't deny it forever. The words fell like the final cut. Mrs. Kingsley broke down in tears, while Mr. Kingsley closed his eyes and exhaled a weary breath. Enough. We erred from the very beginning, and that mistake has lasted too long. Chaos filled the hall, yet within me was an unexpected calm. I felt no triumph, no vindication, only the sense of a circle finally closing. Tamsin squeezed my hand, whispering, Mom, the truth stands with us. Rhea nodded, her eyes alight. They can't deny it anymore. And I knew this night would mark the history of the Kingsley family. Not as a dazzling gala, but as the night when truth was laid bare beneath the glare of hundreds of eyes. The fateful night ended in chaos. News, photos, recordings from that evening spread across every outlet. Every cry, every tear, every bewildered glance was turned into material for the press. But one truth could no longer be denied. I was the biological daughter of the Kingsley family. The next morning, Boston awoke under a strange aftershock. As I walked along the street near our hotel, I overheard fragments of conversations unbelievably an entire life. And the child was switched. That woman, Nora She, looked so proud, as if she never needed the Kingsley name to stand tall. Celeste, pitiful, but also infuriating. A whole life lived in the wrong place. I listened, but held nothing inside. Because after last night, Kai had decided my life and worth would never again be defined by the Kingsley name. That afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Kingsley asked to meet privately. I agreed. In the quiet parlor, it was only the three of us. Mr. Kingsley studied me for a long moment, then said, Nora, we were wrong. We cannot reclaim the years lost. But we want to spend the rest of our lives with you. Mrs. Kingsley clasped my hand, her voice trembling. You may hate us, but please don't turn away. This family needs you. I drew a long breath. After all those years outside their walls, I had never imagined hearing such words. Yet now receiving them, I understood. I no longer needed recognition to exist. I already had my life, my children, Adrian, and the memory of foster parents who raised me with a love beyond calculation. I answered, steady but firm. I forgive you. But I will not return to live in this estate. I will not be a symbol to cover the past. I only want to be myself, to live the life I've built on my own. If anyone wishes to see me, let them step outside these walls and come to me as family, not as Kingsley's. Tears welled in their eyes. They understood my choice was the only path toward true healing. Back at the hotel, Tamsin asked, Mom, have you decided? I nodded. We're going home. Back to Massachusetts. Rhea smiled, her eyes glistening. I knew it. We never belonged to these cold rooms. We belonged to classrooms, to music, 2 nights spent reading together. Tamsin wrapped her arms around me. You gave them a chance. The rest is their choice. We don't need to live to please anyone. Relief washed through me. After so many years, I had traveled in one long circle only to realize home had never been the Kingsley estate. It had always been here, in the hands clasped around mine. The day we left Boston, reporters still buzzed outside. But this time, I had no answers for them. I simply walked with my daughters, my head high. Behind us, the Kingsley mansion loomed cold and unyielding as a monument. Yet in my heart, that monument had lost its weight. On the train back to Massachusetts, late winter sunlight spilled across the windows. I smiled as I watched Tamsin doze against Rhea's shoulder, while Rhea still scribbled into her journal. From my bag, I I pulled an old photograph my foster parents with me on my college graduation day. The image was blurred, but the love within it shone clearly. I whispered, as though speaking to them, "I have reclaimed the truth. But more than that, I've reclaimed myself, and I will live the rest of my life not with bitterness, but with freedom." Outside, the sun burned red like a wordless welcome. I knew from this day on, we would step into a new chapter, not one of family theatrics, but of love, truth, and the freedom to choose. Perhaps what remains after this journey is not only the truth unveiled, but the power of choice. Nora proved that a person's worth does not lie in lineage or titles, but in how we live, how we love, and how we protect what truly belongs to us. Thank you for listening with Snail Story. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to share your thoughts.